And sometimes when they're doing like binding affinity studies, they'll say, okay, well, methyltrenolone is it's neither 5-alpha reduced nor is it aromatizable. So we don't got to worry about some of the amount of it being lost elsewhere. Whereas you throw in testosterone there, and like some's going to be aromatized in an intact animal, and some of it's going to be 5-alpha reduced.
It is time again to dig into the science of bodybuilding with Scott Stevenson. Today on Muscle Minds, we're going to discuss the chemistry of anabolic steroids. If you guys are new to our content, then I highly encourage you to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. We have several bodybuilding podcasts coming out each week. Top minds in our industry and IFBB pros that are sharing their thoughts, sharing their ideas, helping to educate you to get better at the sport that we love. Plus, we try to be entertaining along the way. Hope you guys are having a great day and hope you enjoy the show. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally. All of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. You can use our code THINK for some additional savings on awesome, high-quality, third-party tested supplements from a company that hardcore bodybuilders have trusted for over 15 years. Also, we're brought to you by SupplementSource.ca for all of our Canadian peeps. As I always say, head over there and pick yourself up some Ephedrine. You should take at least 2 to 3 tabs a day for your health.
Yeah, for your health.
I don't even know what we're doing today. Scott has yet to tell me. He said it's all about getting huge. Technically, he said getting huge, baby. And I've got a bunch of different like steroid molecule pictures here. I don't know where we're going. What are we doing, Scott?
Last 2 weeks ago, we were talking about ment.
Yes.
And I was trying to think of like what I knew about ment, and I was trying to discern how that differed from methyltrinolone. So, and ment, of course, is also called trestolone, which is just kind of nifty to have, 2 different names. So, like in that sort of way. So, ment basically, well, we're going to get into this. So, I figured might as well make this sort of an educational step. This is what I do. This is, people's like, how do you get so smart? And I'm curious. It's not so much smart because I forget 99% of what I learned, but I just keep on looking it back up when I forget it because I'm so curious, and maybe a little OCD, and I just enjoy the process. So I'm like, I'll go look this up and check into this, and I figured this would be a nice time to talk about some things. So cue the first image that I sent.
All right, and that was, as it's called, pasted graphic 1 here.
Pasted graphic 1. All right. Yeah. So this shows our good old friend testosterone. And what you see there, that's the basic cholesterol steroid ring. So you see that steroid ring in cholesterol and vitamin D and cortisol and progesterone and estrogen and androstenedione and androstenediol and all the estrogens, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those numbers indicate the numerical, there's 2 different kind of naming systems. I'm not going to go into organic chem here. People will probably start having flashbacks and shit. But that organic chem is like one of the least favorite subjects for most people in school. But in order to sort of have some standardization, the carbons, which form the backbone of the steroid molecule, are numbered. So that's what those numbers mean. If you look kind of it's like almost smack dab in the middle. Mm-hmm. You'll see 1 and a 19 is there, and you just fall around the ring, and they just sort of named numerically. And they name those. If you sort of fall around, it goes numerically, and then it kind of jumps across a little bit. But they come up with a standardized naming system. If you Google trenbolone or winstrol or or stenozolol or what have you, you will see the chemical name. Actually, sometimes 2 versions of those. And they have numbers. So we talk about 17 alpha alkylated. So if you look on the right upper portion of the graphic there,
I see the
that's
17.
what happens. Yeah. So that 17 carbon molecule can be beta esterified or alpha alkylated. and this is a picture that I want to spend too much time on because it doesn't tell you which molecules are there. That's the next one, but it gives you a nice overview of things. When you take this basic testosterone or an estrogen molecule, in this case, if you start with testosterone as your backbone, and you change or modify chemically at those different carbons, oh, good. Well, actually make it bigger because it'd be easier for people to see on their phone.
Okay.
My face isn't important right now. It probably detracts from the presentation.
Well, you know what?
So
I can keep it. Let me give you a little.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
All right. One eye.
Yeah.
So when you modify those carbons, that's of course changes the name of the molecule, and it also, as it turns out, changes the activity in various ways of the molecule in the body.
Okay.
So if you see the 17 alpha alkylation, like adding a methyl group there, that's how we methylate steroids so they can be orally available.
Okay.
And get past that first pass phenomenon. So liver has a hard time metabolizing those. They get into the bloodstream more readily because liver has a tougher time breaking them down when things go from the GI through the hepatic portal system into the liver. And the liver is sort of a first screen. It's like, okay, if anything toxic is coming through from whatever's been eaten, give me first dibs on that because my job is to detoxify.
Yeah. And
the alpha alkylation, is just an example, is where that happens. So if you look at, for instance, in the look to the left on the molecule, and you see on the upper portion of that 19.
Yes.
There's a line between 9 and 19. So that's the 19th carbon. It comes off the 9 carbon. So the 19th carbon, that's because it's just a single carbon sort of floating out there on its own. That's called a methyl group. And if you remove that, if you have no methyl group at 19, that becomes a nor molecule, as in kind of neither nor, and that gives us nor testosterone. Yes.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, kind of cool, huh?
Yeah.
So that's what. Yeah, this is. I mean, you can go around. Well, I do this in my pharmacology 101 talk that people really kind of like. And kind of go through the whole thing. I don't know if we want to do all that here today. You could this is people spend this is what like someone like Patrick Arnold. Yeah. This is like his ballpark. He literally has spent probably half his life looking and drawing out and scribbling on cocktail napkins and that sort of thing. This sort of thing, because this is where all these you can see. There's so many places for different modifications that, given what we know about various molecules, could lend them to having different biological activities.
Okay.
So, for instance, it says there, very generically, removal of C19, so you make this into a NOR, decreases androgenic activity, increases anabolic activity. So that's referring to nandrolone.
Yeah.
But actually, interestingly enough, that's not, and this is where, and I mentioned this, I think last time, I mentioned this a few times on this podcast and others too. If you actually look at nandrolone itself, it's a 19 nor testosterone. It's just testosterone missing that 19 methyl group.
Yeah.
And it's actually more androgenic. But what happens when it gets into the system, unless it's in very large amounts, the typical amounts that someone might use nandrolone, let's say it's 400 or 600. Some people use a lot more, I know. We'll get there. That is then becomes 5 alpha reduced. So if you look just below the 19, there's the 9, there's the 5 carbon.
Yes.
So if you reduce that, that means basically removing a hydrogen. We'll see how it changes. You've got, typically with a carbon, you've got 4 places where you can have a bond. So you've got where you don't see a line there, you're going to have carbons. So you look on the 4 carbon there, just next to it. Got a double bond between the 5 and the 4, and then the 4 also has a single bond with 3. So there's 3 of those 4 bonds, and then there's a hydrogen floating around there. So the 5 is, in this case, can be reduced, adding a hydrogen to it, and it changes that bond. We'll see this when I show you the next. We go to the next. Actually. Yeah, we can go to we'll jump a couple down. We'll get to that at the end. But when you 5 alpha reduce there, so you act on that 5 carbon,
Yeah.
Then you produce dihydronandrolone. Actually, there's 2 hydrogens on there, so dihydro. And then that is less androgenic and more anabolic, which is what nandrolone's known for.
Okay.
So if you have, for instance, if someone were completely lacking in 5-alpha reductase activity, they block that altogether, which actually sometimes people do. That makes nandrolone more androgenic because it's nandrolone. It doesn't get 5-alpha reduced to dihydronandrolone. And nandrolone itself, before it's been changed by the 5-alpha reductase enzyme, is very androgenic. It's more androgenic than DHT. So here's the problem. For instance, someone's wanting to avoid hair loss, and they're using finasteride or dutasteride to inhibit the 5-alpha reductase. Either dutasteride inhibits both of the 2 main isoforms there of 5-alpha reductase. What that would normally mean is that you don't get testosterone converting into dihydrotestosterone, which is more androgenic. But if you're using DECA, nandrolone, or NPP, because it's easier on the hair, right? Normally it is when you've got normal flux through that enzyme, but you're like, you know what, I'm going to cover both my bases, and I'm going to inhibit the 5-alpha reductase, which normally would help because you don't get the DHT. In this case, you don't get the nandrolone converted into DH nandrolone.
Yeah.
You have more nandrolone, which is even worse than DHT as far as androgenic actions.
Yeah.
So you basically you shoot yourself in the foot and you fuck yourself sideways by using a dutasteride or finasteride alongside a nandrolone, because you end up with more nandrolone and more androgenic activity and more potential for hair loss if you're someone who's has that propensity for hair loss. So you can go all the way around. You can see, like, all the things that are written there. Alkylation at those 1 and 2 bonds. That means just adding a methyl or a carb, like methylated group of acetate, propionate. Those are all alkyl groups, basically, carbon strings. And if you go, let's just go to the next. We'll go to the next downloadable. It's just kind of like
this guy
graphic 2, I think. Yeah. So you still got that numbering system up there. That's actually cholesterol, but you still have the same numbering systems. Cholesterol is very similar to testosterone. And then what's in the middle is testosterone. And what I did there was kind of like duplicated the previous figure we were looking at and added in the names of some of our good buddies.
Okay.
So, like, if you want to have get rid of the methyl group, so there's no methyl group, you've got nortestosterone, you've got nandrolone, and another nortestosterone is trenbolone. See, that's like right there smack dab in the middle, that 19-nor.
Okay.
So, sorry I don't have numbers on the big one. And if you kind of go counterclockwise, you can see when you have a double bond between 1 and 2, that gives you Dbol and Equipoise, for instance.
Okay.
And Dbol is just methylated Equipoise. Tbol has got a double bond there too. You can attach various things to that carbon 2, and that gives you, for instance, anadrol and superdrol, which are very similar. Winstrol adds a 5-carbon group, a pyrazole ring there at the A ring. So on the left, and that's how you get Winstrol. Keep just kind of floating around, kind of counterclockwise here. You can add hydroxyl group or a chloride group, and like a chloride group gives you Turinabol.
Okay, yeah. So,
and then there's that. I'm at the very bottom there, 5-alpha reduction.
Yeah.
So we're adding I may have said removing a proton. Adding a proton, and hydrogen, same thing. Changes androgenic action. So DHT is more androgenic than TEST, but DHN is less androgenic than nandrolone. That's what I just went through. So that's why you got to be careful if you're going to use dutasteride or finasteride, because if you're using nandrolone alongside it, you're going to go the wrong direction. You're going to have more of the androgenic. So it's not simply that 5-alpha reduction every single time makes something more androgenic. In the case of nandrolone, it makes nandrolone less androgenic, changing it into dihydronandrolone.
Yeah.
So, and then, for instance, keep moving along. There's the methylation. The methyl group is just that carbon with 3 or 4 hydrogens on it. At C7, that gives us, ta-da, trestolone, which is also ment, which is methyl nandrolone.
Okay.
So now we're getting into kind of the cool stuff, which is just like looking at ment, which is what you asked about.
Yeah.
And this is really kind of fascinating because there's no like hard and fast rules necessarily. There's just general rules, and that's why this is sort of so fascinating. So look at the 5-alpha reduction. We've already said that it has different effects depending on whether you're starting with testosterone or nortestosterone, test or nandrolone. 5-alpha reduction in one case makes it more androgenic, and the other makes it less androgenic. You've got ment, which is methyl nandrolone, so it's methylated there. Just one. You add one little carbon on in there, and you've changed nandrolone into ment. Those are very different.
Yeah.
And you have experience with ment, I believe.
Yeah.
That's why we brought it up.
With both of them, and
right.
It's interesting that just one little change can create such a different impact with the compound,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's what's so kind of cool about this.
Yeah.
And there's aromatase is actually several steps. If it goes into the aromatization of something, but the methyl gets removed, and you end up with estrogenic compounds, generally speaking.
Okay.
So aromatization is that's a chemical term for what happens to that A ring. It's basically kind of all the carbons kind of share a common bond. It's a very kind of cool, energetic phenomenon that I don't know enough about to really explain it very well, but it's very, 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 very cool, and it takes several steps in this case to do it. So aromatization is kind of a big deal. And then there's that C carbon, or there's 17 carbon. That's the big one. So that's where if we add an alkyl group that gives oral activity, if we esterify that, like with an esterified compound like testosterone enanthate or nandrolone decanoate, so decanoic acid is a long carbon chain. That's a fatty acid carbon chain. Enanthate is a long carbon chain. It's a fatty acid carbon chain. Yeah. You add that on there, and then you have this dangling lipophilic, fat-loving carbon chain. It's a fatty acid. Fats like fats, and they don't like water. That basically is a chemical anchor to anchor an esterified steroid molecule in cells or places where there is fat molecules that it would kind of cling to. It's it's like adding fat Velcro to the steroid.
Okay. Yeah.
So that but you still got all the flow of the tissues, and the lymph is moving things, and you've got some rate at which just like imagine if you cover your car with Velcro and then put a bunch of fluffy animals on there, and some of them stuck really well. Like the longer the ester length, like decanoate's really long. The more sticky it is, the more lipophilic it is. That'd be like a sticky, like an animal on your Velcro car that really clings on there really well. And then some would be like generic Velcro that you picked up at the gas station or something like that.
Doesn't work as well. Might fall off.
Doesn't stick as well. Yeah. It's an acetate or a propionate or a shorter.
Okay.
And so they don't have the lipophilicity, and they leave the depot where you've injected the steroid molecule more rapidly. So imagine you get on your car and you do your injection. Say you inject 3 different esters.
Okay.
And it's like you got 3 different kinds of animals on there on your Velcro car, and you take off down the road. That's just basically what's going to happen. Eventually, those things are going to fly off because of the wind. But some of them are going to stick around longer than others, literally. Yeah. And that's going to be a function of the length of those. Length and the configuration, too. That changes a little bit. But mainly, the main thing is the length of the carbon chain as to how lipophilic it is and how long it stays stuck with the other lipid-like molecules that are in the bolus of the steroid you gave, and the carrier molecule you have.
Yeah.
So this is why carrier molecules matter. Whether you've got MCT oil in there or whatever else, those have different lipophilic characteristics. And so how fast the steroids will leave the depot depends on the size of the depot. So it's a matter of whether you're driving a motorcycle or you're driving a big box truck, or what kind of Velcro you used sort of on your truck, which would be what kind of carrier oil you're using. And so the size and the carrier oil both change how fast those lipophilic esterified steroids leave, as well as how good their Velcro is, so to speak, which is the length, largely the length of the chain, but also the configuration of the chain too. So that's why, like, there's a classic study with using nandrolone, decanoate, and NPP, and they actually injection site also matters. So whether it's the deltoid or the glute, and some of that is probably just the physical. It's probably blood flow. It's how well the size of the muscle can accommodate a big bolus, because the bolus size matters, and activity in those muscles. How much literally you've got, like, just physical mechanical squeezing, which is going to, like, it's like driving the car faster or slower. Okay. So the size of the muscle matters as well. So are you driving in a thunderstorm, or like in a tornado where a muscle's really active? Let's say you're using your delts all the time because you work in a warehouse and you're lifting things up. That's probably going to impact the pharmacokinetics, how fast these things get in your bloodstream, the peak, when the peak occurs, how high it is, how long it lasts, in terms of elevating the blood levels. So all of those things kind of come into play, and if you can use that analogy that I just kind of came up with on the fly, actually, of the cars and the Velcro and the
it was a weird one, by the way. It conjured up a weird visual, but yes, it made sense at the same time.
Hopefully you'll remember it. You got the fuzzy animals on the side of your Velcro car, your motorcycle, or Pinto, or box truck. But so that's what all the modifications do. And I was like, I couldn't remember what was going on exactly with ment and methyltrianolone. Okay. Because that was used in research. So let's go now to, I think, the next one. See what I sent you, what order I sent you in.
The next one.
Let's do the next one. Yeah.
Testosterone, nandrolone.
Next one's good. Yeah.
All right.
Here, hold on. Get back to, there we go. Yeah, so there's Winstrol. I talked about. Remember that pyrrole group?
Yeah.
Off to the left, I mentioned that's the pyrrole group that gets added. That's kind of a cool thing. Like, just throw that motherfucker on there, and it's, Winstrol has unique properties. But there's our friend Test on the left, and then if you can see the on testosterone, sort of the left in the middle. I've got showing with my mouse, but you obviously can't see that. You see that methyl group, that kind of thicker dark line that points straight up?
I do.
That's the methyl group.
Is that 3 methyl groups then on the testosterone?
There's 2, and then the other has a hydroxy. Well, it's hydroxylated methyl group there.
That OH, is that the one that's different?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a hydroxyl group. It's called.
Okay.
But that does mean you've got a carbon off of there, and then an OH on top of it.
Oh, okay.
So. Yeah, but 2 pure methyl groups there. So if you have no 19 methyl group, you have a nortestosterone, you get nandrolone.
Okay, yeah.
And then you take that's a nor, and sort of if you want to talk about family, sometimes people do this, and you say trenbolone and nandrolone are both 19 nors. You can see they're both missing that methyl group in the 19, but you've got a couple other modifications in trenbolone there.
I see that.
Yeah.
2 to be specific, it looks like.
Yep. Yeah. So there's some double bonds in there.
Oh, that's what that is.
At like the 9, I think, and the 11 carbons.
Okay.
Is where they're typically noted.
Huh.
There are different naming systems that you can use, and that's where it gets kind of confusing.
Okay.
And one of the naming systems calls trenbolone a trianolone, basically, with numbers in there to designate where the triene groups are. So that's that double bond between carbons is going to be an ene group. The name of that has an ene at the end, so the ene comes in there, or trianolone. And so if we compare, we can just look at these. Basically, ment is methyl 17 alpha methyl nandrolone, and methyl trianolone, the one I was confused about, is 17 alpha methyl trenbolone.
Yeah.
Or methyl trianolone.
Okay. For
short. So that's just like you can, you can kind of figure that out if you look at the molecules. Go to Google Images. You see this. You don't have to have a degree in organic chemistry.
You can see
you're
the
really
differences.
just looking at modifications in. Yeah, you can see the differences.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, mint does seem to aromatize a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas nandrolone does not. It's not supposed to, but both of those can bind the progesterone receptor, so you can have interactions there with progestogenic effects impacting estrogen receptor populations, for instance. So you can get estrogenic sides from a progestin like nandrolone or trenbolone. Methyltrianolone, for instance, so the methylated tren is super strong. It's like a standard that's used. And sometimes when they're doing like binding affinity studies, they'll say, okay, well, methyltrenolone it's neither 5-alpha reduced nor is it aromatizable. So we don't got to worry about some of the amount of it being lost elsewhere. Whereas you throw in testosterone there, and like some's going to be aromatized in an intact animal, and some of it's going to be 5-alpha reduced.
Okay,
so the testosterone gets metabolized in different directions, so you don't end up what you see in terms of binding as a function of the enzyme activities that are in whatever you're studying. So if you have this is the interesting thing. Like if you just look at binding to a singular cell, depending on what you've done, what kind of medium it's in, or sometimes they use tissue studies where you've got tissues that are living because they're in medium with oxygen and glucose, and they've got fuel and they've got oxygen, so they can live. You've got 5-alpha reductase activity, for instance, in different tissues.
Yeah.
So what you see in the tissue might be different what you see in a singular binding study that's done with an isolated receptor and no metabolizing of the testosterone or whatever the steroid is. So that's why you got to look and see. You got to kind of figure out what model did they use, and what comes out on paper in terms of like binding affinity.
Yeah,
doesn't always match with what happens. And the example that we just gave, which is the clear one, because that's a kind of a nebulous statement, is with nandrolone. Nandrolone is really androgenic in terms of binding to the androgen receptor, what it does, but it normally gets metabolized substantially to dihydronandrolone. And this is why, like when Jordan did this, Peters, and he's made that public, and I've heard of many people now kind of doing this, is they'll take like 2 grams of nandrolone, massive dose of nandrolone, and it's very androgenic. And so they don't have, they don't get like sexual side effects, the decadec and that sort of thing. They actually have elevated sex drive from that. Because they've got so much nandrolone that the 5-alpha reductase isn't able to convert that as it normally would to dihydronandrolone. So you're taking advantage of the nandrolone's androgenic activity, which increases sex drive, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense, man. It gets me thinking, because we know we've talked about on all the podcasts that everybody's TRT dose is going to be unique, that everybody has a unique response to testosterone. And I think of a guy that I know who has been prescribed 300 milligrams a week, and that keeps him in the normal range. And I also know that he aromatizes like mad. And I mean, there could be a link right there,
of course,
that he's aromatizing more than somebody else would. And you know what, too, this is kind of like a little bit off topic, but it really reminds me, too, that there's a whole movement of people who are saying, like, there's never a need to use an AI while on TRT, that you never need it. And it's a black and white statement. And it really makes me think more about, like, how individual, because that's been my thought, is like, well, hold on, guys. This is such an individual thing. I don't ever want to use a statement like never. But it makes me think of how, it could be very beneficial for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're using TRT, and it's not like you can just kind of plop testosterone in there and then everything else stays the same.
Yeah.
to get your testosterone where you would like it to be, within range, would be a target. And if you're someone, the reason why he may need TRT is because he aromatizes so readily.
Yeah.
Makes total sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because his testosterone levels are getting, sucked down through the aromatase system. He doesn't have testosterone because he's aromatizing so rapidly.
Yeah.
So, like for him, he would be a great example of someone who taking an AI might be, not that I'm trying to give medical advice, but taking an AI would be probably could be a very effective way of doing TRT, so to speak, or getting him back in the normal range, because he's going to prevent that sort of loss of the testosterone pool to aromatization, as well as with less estrogen, you're going to have less of that feedback inhibition. You're going to have more gonadotrophin coming down, LH and FSH. The LH is going to stimulate more testosterone. So you're just remedying, if that's the case for him, that the root of his problem could be, don't know this for sure, but it could be too much aromatase activity.
Yeah.
So go to the root.
Maybe that in itself would be enough. He doesn't even need to take tests in that case,
That is the case, actually. They've demonstrated, like with AIs and SERMs, that you can just block the estrogen.
Yeah.
Even for him, an AI would be better, assuming he doesn't, drop his estrogen too low. AIs could also have just their own negative side effects too,
of course,
potentially, on lipids and those sorts of things. But if he could tease that dose out, that could be a better, strategy for him. Since he's going to take an AI anyway, because his estrogen's so high, maybe he's using a SERM, and it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other, until they've kind of figured out like what are all the polymorphisms in your genetic screening that are going to tell you whether you're at higher risk from an issue with a SERM versus an AI. It's you're pissing in the wind, I think, as far as I know, to try to figure out whether it's better over 10 years or 20 years or 30 years of TRT to use an AI or a SERM. Who knows? But
yeah. Anyway, though, that was kind of like just a side thing. Looking at all of this, and you just kind of got me thinking a little bit more about that bigger picture, or I should say about application.
Right. So, so that we can. I think I may have misspoke here. If we want to go to the next, there's a next figure. It's kind of a cool one.
All right. What do we got here?
So that shows this. So this is even more why I was confused, actually. That shows in the bottom right there are two buddies. Methyltrinolone, the one I was confused about, and then Ment is the one in the top there, 7-alpha methyl 9-nortestosterone.
Okay.
So methyltrinolone is actually 17-methyl trenbolone, whereas Ment is 7-alpha methyl 19-nortestosterone. So the methyl groups are one's on 7, one's on 17. So that's numerically perfect to make it confusing. You can see if you look up there, you can see the methyl group hanging. In that case, they actually kind of drew it in with the CH3 on there. That's a methyl group. Yeah, they made it known. So that's just kind of that gets us to the very end. So that shows you testosterone to estradiol. If you want to screen capture this, or these are all. I think I found these all in papers. I have the references if someone wants them, but they're all easy to find. Like literally, this didn't take me too long to dig up. I had most of these already and stuff I'd already downloaded. I didn't have to find, except for the bottom one. I didn't have to find anything.
I see. So I'm looking at the middle top. I see testosterone, and then through aromatase going to the right, that's estradiol. Yep. If you look down, 5-alpha reductase, you go down to dihydrotestosterone.
DHT, yep.
And then what's that below that then, that 3-AHSD?
3-alpha hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase.
Okay.
Another enzyme.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's like a pool of androgens, and typically if you just look at like binding and what we kind of know in a cellular context, it's 5-alpha DHT that is in testosterone that are really the two main players here.
Okay.
But you have metabolism, and you have a pool of, like for instance, if you look at the bottom on the left, the bottom 4 molecules there,
Okay.
you've got a pool there where, DHT can be converted to 5-alpha androstenediol,
Yeah.
which can go to androsterone, which can go to 5-alpha androstenedione. So those are the 5, like those 5-alpha androstenedione and 5-androstenediol are the 5-alpha reduced versions of the prohormones androstenedione and androstenediol.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can imagine someone like Patrick Arnold, and who I can't say for sure, but I think he was very much responsible for bringing some of these things to market. Like
I believe so too.
androstenedione was used by the Germans like back in the 40s. They were giving that to their athletes.
Okay.
And the Western research that came out when, Mark McGuire was getting in trouble for pro-hormone use and that kind of stuff didn't really show that you could do what was hoped and just load more androstenedione and then get more testosterone from that. But I had, and I don't know where the hell it was, but someone sent me a paper in German, which I could read long time ago, and I think I haven't been able to find it. Maybe I could find it now that I have my computer switched into German. Maybe I can dig it up somehow.
Yeah.
But it was demonstrating that they were having effects there, and women who use DHEA, which is even further kind of upstream, can get effects that are steroid. Well, they're steroid-like because DHEA is a steroid. So, or androstenedione as well. So, because women are more sensitive to androgens, of course. But there's kind of a pool, and there's metabolism there, and it's a very complex system. But there's some recycling, I think, that goes on of these molecules. Okay. You see those arrows go both directions?
Yeah. I was wondering what that meant.
Yeah, that means arrows go in both directions. So you can, if you've got a whole bunch of DHT that's building up, it could go either to 5-androstenedione or 5-alpha androstenedione or 5-alpha androstenediol. So. I think it's just called androdiol as well. There's multiple names for all these things, so that's why it's so confusing. Okay. But yeah, that's just a little insight into steroid biology. I'm by far not an expert here whatsoever, but and that's just kind of tells you kind of what you're playing with, what you're doing when you're using different hormones. And this is why, like what I do when I talk about, switch over, I can see you here again. When I talk about this in the context of that pharmacology course is like, okay, so this is what the bros kind of know,
right?
You want to double up on 19 Nors, both of which are going to have are going to be progestin. So you want to use Deca and Nandrolone at the same time? Probably not.
Yeah.
Because you're then, if you've got different steroids that have different chemical configurations and thus different abilities to be aromatized or 5-alpha reduced, and estrogen, as we talked about last time, can be anabolic too. You've got basically a number of different sort of anabolic targets to shoot at that the different molecules allow you to target. So, why, like if you got 3 targets there, you got 19 Nors and you got DH testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, or 5-alpha reduced molecules, and you maybe got orals too. Use a 19 Nor, in small amounts, using a 5-alpha reduced in smaller amounts, or something that is more androgenic. Yeah. And then maybe if someone's going to use an oral, which probably most people really don't need to do, although most people do, I think. Then you got something else there. You got another tool. So the chemistry predicts to some degree what things do, and they figured all that out. Like that very first figure, they figured that out just by making the changes, and then doing things like looking at the Hirschberger's assay, which gives you that androgenic to anabolic ratio that you can find the lists of all over the place.
Yeah,
and that's just looking at the relative growth of an androgenic of the prostate versus a muscle that's located in there's a couple different muscles that they use in the perineum area, like in the taint area of a rat.
Okay.
Yeah. Huh. So you got an anabolic effect from the muscle, and you got prostate being the androgenic, and the ratio there of the weight changes tells you a ratio, relatively speaking. But that's a function of the rat, and that's a function of the fact that rats, are different than humans. But so that's where those things kind of come from. Is they made the change? Like, how does this? What happens if we change this and we inject some rats with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you can also look at binding affinities. Another thing, just as a kind of an important thought, is also that people look at the binding affinities. This is a real big thing. I mentioned in the talk, is that just the binding affinity doesn't tell you how strong something is.
Okay.
It could bind and block.
Oh.
Most of the orals, like Winstrol and Anadrol and Dianabol, for instance, when they do the classical binding studies, they don't bind at all. Like,
which
basically
is strange.
insignificant.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they still turn on the genes. So they do transactivation studies. They turn on the genes. It could be the different antigen receptor that's on the membrane versus the classical one.
Yeah.
And that makes sense because you can feel, you take an oral like Halo or something like that, and people feel that right away.
In a very different way than, say, taking a shot of test. The response you have or whatever is, very different.
Different receptor system. So it's still turning things on, but it's coming in through a different pathway. So just because, like, if we just went by the Sartok has got the kind of best, most oft quoted, that's the first name on the paper, and it's like, well, I guess there's no point in using Anadrol or Dbol.
Yeah,
or
they don't work.
Like that.
They don't work.
They're not gonna. They don't bind, so they don't work. It's like, I think experience differs.
Yeah.
Hey, that point goes.
Danny, it brought up a question for him. He says,
right.
he refers to you as Stevenson. He says, "Hey, Stevenson, is unmethylated Dbol basically Equipoise, or how is it different?"
Yep. Yep. Or other way around, Dbol is methylated.
Yeah.
Boldenone.
Huh.
Equipoise.
It's crazy that it's just one little change, and now I picture it as just that little stick being added on.
Right.
One little stick added on.
Yeah. Well, it's all to 17 carbon. So boldenone has undecyclinate, I think is how you say that. That's the name of its ester, esterified fatty acid that gives its half-life. And then it's beta esterified and 17 alpha alkylated to become the beta esterification gives you boldenone. The 17 alpha alkylation gives you Dbol.
Okay, yeah.
Methandienone or methanodrastenolone, two different names for the same thing. Just Dbol is much easier.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of a cool little tidbit, but so that methylation makes a huge difference as far as one, the half-life and everything else, but it's not like you're just taking rapid acting boldenone,
right?
When someone takes Dbol,
the effect is totally different.
Yep. So that's a good question.
That's cool.
Yeah. So hopefully that is that's helped me figure out the differences. While I was confused about those two, I don't remember what the difference was chemically and which was which.
Yeah.
They're both pretty strong, but they're actually substantially different. Methyl tren versus methyl, and they're methylated different places, but they're based on nandrolone, nortestosterone, and trenbolone.
Yeah.
Which are substantially different. So really, there's like four different chemical, three different chemical differences between those two. But they're somewhat, and one's aromatizable, one's not.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild, actually.
Hey, I had another question here, completely off topic from what we're talking about. This is one of our guys from over at Patreon. He said, because we had taken questions from over at Patreon on the last episode, and after that he missed that. But he said, I know I'm late, but maybe it could we could use this in the next one. I'm interested in exercise physiology, and would like to hear about how Dr. Scott's career path has looked. I think it sounds great for somebody who is into fitness and bodybuilding, but I wouldn't want to teach or to do research much. Would rather work with people and do my own thing, like Scott does. Thinking this might not be the thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, you can you don't have to do a PhD to be a personal trainer or a coach. You certainly don't. I'm just really curious, and I love to teach. And it sounds like he doesn't want to do he would want to do podcasts like this.
Okay, yeah.
There's an interesting thing. I think because I get this question a lot, and I think kind of what the crux of the issue is some people they would like to if they could wave a magic wand and all of a sudden just have a massive amount of accumulated scientific knowledge and experience, they would, of course. But just kind of Ronnie said, everyone want to be a bodybuilder, but ain't no one want to lift no heavy ass weights.
Yeah,
it's like everyone want to have PhD smarts, but ain't nobody want to go to school. It's something like that.
Yeah.
And I did want to go to school. I love school. I just had a chat with a guy, great guy. He's probably listening right now. He's going to know who he is. We chatted for 3 hours about getting into exercise science and kind of the best way to do it given his career path thus far.
Yeah.
And he was like, he's not a 20-something-year-old. He's been at it for a while, and he's already got some pretty solid credentials. He's like, he really doesn't need to start off at the beginner's level, so to speak. He's had a lot of the biology and medical related things already. But my point was when you're in school, that's it. That you're learning and you're digging in the information. That's a blast. You're already doing what you want to do. Kind of the end goal is I want to have my degree and be doing my career. Be settled into what it is that comes after you get credentialed. But if the idea of learning and diving into the new information is what you really dig, which is the case for me, that I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly like with the thing we just talked about for the last hour. That was, I went after the podcast and looked into that, made some notes. I had another chance a few days ago to look into it again, and then this morning I finished off the stuff I wanted to talk about because I just it's not like I put in an order for 10 grams of mint and or methyltrinolone and I'm going to blast on that for the next year or something. I just was interested in learning. That was just fascinating information for me. So as far as his question goes, you can be a great example of a guy who is just, everyone knows him as incredibly intelligent, is Lyle McDonald.
Okay, yeah.
And Lyle's got an undergraduate degree from UCLA, I believe, and in exercise science, and no graduate degrees, but he just loves the information. He's made himself smart by being smart and being curious. So you can do all of that. So it's sort of like one way to look at it, and this is why kind of he's asking me, is what would you see yourself wanting to do? And can you put that question up again? Because I want to see
absolutely.
Quite how that'll help me with my thoughts here. Sounds great. So, a master's degree, there's many master's degrees that are, health promotion is one, for instance, where you would go and you would take the basic exercise physiology courses, but you're learning how to work with people. A lot of those are corporate fitness based. They have some exercise psychology there. You're not going to have to do a thesis, doing animal work like I did for a little while many, many moons ago. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have to do a PhD or dissertation. You're just getting a practitioner's master's degree, which gives you a great credential. It's going to definitely elevate you above your average personal trainer like LA Fitness or something like that.
Yeah.
And they know that you're not there because you're not interested in teaching. You're interested in being a practitioner, and you're not interested in doing research because it's not a research-based degree. So the MAs typically see this isn't always the case, but a master's of science will typically be something where you're going to do a thesis with the possibility of doing a PhD and going to research afterwards. And they'll also offer an MA. So I actually started at Texas doing an MA. Well, I think they're both MA. It was an MED actually. That's the other option you'll see. End up getting the MA, which was their more scientific based, and there was this University of Texas at Austin is as much science oriented as you can. It's a hardcore research institution, basically. So that just don't put too much weight on the title of the degree. But an MED for sure is a practitioner-based degree. So you find a program like that where you can get involved. The thing for him is going to be, the difficulty could be is that there's you're not going to find a lot that's, as far as in the U.S., that's bodybuilding related. That you probably could. You know, you got to find the right person and he would have to figure out what he wants to do more so than what I know from his question. He may know this more than I'm thinking, but if you find, for instance, a program where someone is doing bodybuilding related research, those graduate students are probably going to be the ones that are going to do thesis projects and that sort of thing. So he may want to be a personal trainer, but he may not have interest in work and coach people that are bodybuilders, but he may not have any interest in working with your quote unquote soccer mom or lifestyle clients. So he may be able to get into a program where he can satisfy some of that curiosity and exercise physiology, where they have someone doing that stuff, interact in the lab, and then get the appropriate degree. So that would be the kind of way to do it. Also, there's programs like Martin McDonald's program, not Lyle, but Martin. He's in the UK. Mac Nutrition. If you just look that up, MAC Nutrition, I think it's macnutrition.com. He's got like a 1-year program that covers basically, you know, physique, athlete. It's nutrition oriented, but I think they do some training things there. It's an excellent program from what I've heard. He's a phenomenal guy. The instructors are all solid. It wouldn't give you. That's helpful for them. They have a different credentials. Need to be a personal trainer in the UK, but that's a great program. He would and it's all going to be right on point with what he wants to do.
Okay.
So he could do that, and it's easy to get the personal trainer certifications.
Yeah.
So part of like, if he wants to do what I'm doing, like, you know, sort of be the guy who takes the science and, you know, translates it for people so they can understand it, then he's going to have to go and get a PhD probably, you know, to be able to do that. Not necessarily, it could be like Lyle, but that would be the best way to have that aptitude. So I'm not sure what part of what I do he's most interested in, but if he can find, the best advice I give him is find someone who's doing as close to exactly what he wants to do and who's really good at it.
Yeah.
Figure out what they did. Just copycat their career path as much as possible. And it could be just fucking training bunches of people, like dozens and hundreds and thousands of people. Like Ken. Ken's a perfect example.
Yeah, yeah. You know, like Skip, he has not had like a degree in anything related to that, but I mean, he's what I would call a true expert at the same time. You know what I mean? And I do think that there is something to be said for that. You know, like I don't know, after having coached now for about 13 years, what I do now is very different than when I first started. And I would say that what I learned is not something that I've seen taught.
No, I think John Jewett has a program.
I heard his course is good. I know somebody who's run John Jewett's course, and I heard a lot of good things about it. I heard that he has a lot of really good information in there, and it's packed with info, and he's still building on it. So once I'd actually considered joining that just to continue educating myself.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
I have too. You know? Yeah. I mean, and Victor Black's got some pretty cool stuff.
Okay.
You know, he's got his own approach, which is really solid and really, you know, conservative but effective at the same time. Like it makes as much sense as just about anything. If you're gonna become the kind of the optimal man, he has a term for sort of his strategy where he's, you know, trying to get as much synergy out of the least but still effective doses of PEDs that are used. And I forget the name right now; it's kind of blanking on it. But he's got a brilliant approach, you know, and he's crafted that though. But he's been around, like his master class is called that for a reason because he's been at this for decades.
Yeah,
you know, so you can't supplant that to some really at all. Like, there's no substitute for experience.
Yeah,
but and the thing is, I think. And this isn't like, you know, Rudy toot toot, but there will be people who they want to try to come off as if they know more than they may actually know.
Oh, absolutely.
You can still hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think that there's
double cording, baby.
Yeah. My power was going down. I see that all the time, and I see people who just started promoting themselves as coaches not too long ago. And now a couple years later, they're saying, I've been coaching for the past decade. You know,
shit. Okay.
Yeah. I see stuff like that.
Because they started in
a lot.
2019, so like that's a decade. 2020, I guess.
Yeah.
Since
I coached
decade,
since the last decade. How about that?
I could say I've been coaching for a century now because I started in the 90s. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is that like there's someone. If you're a coach, you've been at this for a while, and you've competed once. Let's say you're one of those coaches. You've done one show. You've been personal training for a while. You've got maybe a couple years experience. You are totally equipped to help beginners.
Absolutely.
You're so far above them. And there's tons of beginners like that. If you look at the marketplace, that's your the highest, that's your biggest number. Your biggest numbers are there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have so much dropout. So, start there. Don't try to try to get people to the Olympia stage or whatever.
Right.
Until maybe you've been at it for a while, and you'll have some people who you're going to have some people who are starting out like, I don't know how much they want to spend, some exorbitant rate for a well-known big name trainer or coach. So they start with you, and you're going to have some people that just have untold genetics, which are really, really good. And then it just builds on itself. If you be honest, I think from the very get-go and be good to people, it's going to serve everyone.
Hey, that's a lot in the way that I started. When I started helping people and coaching them, it's not because like I had been to the Olympia and I was getting ready, other guys ready for the Olympia. I had guys that were like, hey, I want to do a show like you did. And I was like, well, I've done a show, so I could help you do a show. You know what I mean? And obviously my approach has changed over the years, but I was able to help people, do really good things who were, newer to it than I was,
Yeah. So back to the the original question then, kind of figure out how far you come, what you want to do, and what do you need a PhD to do what you're doing? No. Do you want to know a bunch of stuff? Yeah. Well, then enjoy the path. Just keep on learning, and you'll eventually get there. I was telling a friend, it's like it's just you're in the same kind of the same boat here, Scott. Too. Like you're seeing this. It's better as you get the same questions. Like you just. Every 2 or 3 years, it's almost like, just the wheel of time keeps on rolling around. It's like Groundhog, Day, Groundhog year. The same questions are being asked over and over again, recycled. So I've just seen them dozens and dozens of times.
Yeah.
Like Ken brought me on as a moderator on a board before Intense Muscle that he was modding on way back when. And, so that was in like 2001 or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
And the same questions were being asked like before, like at the beginning of the internet. And of course, before there was internet. But so like Ken and I have been around since the internet started.
Yeah.
And we've seen, they're still asking the same questions.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. It's like, wow. Like it's almost like, we got a DeLorean and like we're coming back from the future and we're betting on the horse races. I know the answer to these questions, not because like I just have this knowledge pool that no one else does. It's because I've seen the question.
Yeah.
It's like taking an IQ test for the 15th time, and it's the same questions.
Yeah. God,
and
you're
the first
smart.
Time wow, you're so smart. It's like, because I was able to answer the first 50 questions like in no time flat because I already knew the answers to them. I have a decent memory.
Hey,
and
that says a lot, though.
How fast, too.
That is knowledge, though. You know what I mean? It's you who spent the guy who spent 15 years hearing those questions asked over and over again. And I'll tell you what, I bet that your answers have changed now than the answer you would have provided 15 years ago. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, now I don't think I'm probably going to forget too soon the difference between methyltrianolone and ment.
Okay, yeah.
Like that level of like that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That was just, I do rabbit holes like that several times a week on things. And I've been doing that for, 52 weeks a year for 30 years.
It's a lot of reps.
So that's a lot of rabbit holes. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of reps, man.
Hey.
So I have to go down some of them twice, but eventually, like, you know what's down the hole. So you can just, like, what's in the hole? It's like, well, a methylnandrolone and methyltrenbolone or whatever. It's like, whoa, shit.
Yeah.
I know that. I've been there.
Hey, we got a couple more that just popped up. If you don't mind
cool.
talking with some cool people here. One gentleman by the name of Casey Reed joins us.
Oh shit,
Lats, what's up, man? He says, ask Scott if my purple helmeted warrior of passion is getting smaller as I age, or are my hands getting bigger from GH? I await his answer.
He needs to send some Scott McNally pictures. You have his number, I believe.
Oh, God. God.
Yeah.
Let me block Casey really quick here.
Send them now and then no GH this week, but bump your test up so then we can have a helmet warrior versus hands comparison with and without, you know. We'll modify some variables and then send him another one next weekend.
Oh, God. Right? Okay. Casey is officially blocked on my iPhone here.
Good.
And then Matt asks us, he says, totally off today's topics. I want to know scientifically why some pins go so well. No pain, smooth slide, no PIP, and others just suck. Even when all variables are exactly the same, pin size, compound, etc. I know exactly what he's talking about, man. You ever put your TRT injection, all legally dosed by the law of test, right. DECA, and Masteron, and you jab that guy in, and oh my God, instantly you're like, was that a lawn dart?
Right. Well, the one thing that's obviously not the same every single time is, let me get you back here on, so I can see you, is location. It's not exactly the same. So
you wouldn't want it to be either. Not every time.
No, not necessarily. Exactly. Well, let's say it is the same time, and let's say you're just doing weekly, so you've got maybe some residual there. You've got a depot that still isn't completely empty of the previous bolus.
Yeah, that's
true. I mean, just kind of like hypothetical situation. So let's say like this is everything goes into this sort of depot, this hole, and when there's nothing there, and then you fill it up to here, no problem. Okay. But if you fill it up a little bit more, then you start having some nerve irritation and pain.
Yeah.
Okay. So you do the one shot and nothing, and then you go into the same spot again, and then you bypass the threshold for irritation where nerves are being compressed.
Yeah.
And it also could be because, like, one of the reasons why glutes can be if we're talking about glutes, and why it varies in terms of how much pain post-injection pain people get PIP, is the nerve density in the muscles. So how close you are to a nerve on a given injection can make a difference. And whether you actually go through a nerve, sometimes, you may like just nick the nerve, like you hit the nerve.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you can feel that. You get a jump if it's a motor nerve, like a reflexive jump. And you can feel the pain then too sometimes if you're on a sensory nerve.
Yeah. So
you're hitting different spots every single time. What can also people hit veins too? Like, that's why the idea is, you should withdraw the syringe a little bit, aspirate, quote unquote, before you inject to make sure you're not injecting into a vein. But it could be that you've gone through a vein and you don't know it, and it may not be a very big one, or you're in the part of the muscle that's got more capillaries or what have you. And in one case, you got more of that bolus that's carried away by a greater blood flow because you literally have opened up a vein, that's going to draw that away. And that, of course, in itself is going to cause inflammation.
Sure.
Because you've got, your immune system will say, what the hell's going on here? You've got a hematoma basically going on, even though you wouldn't be able to see it, very small one. So you could have less of the irritant in there, whatever's in your injection that's irritating. The solvent, more than likely, and because it's being carried away, or more because it's not. Could be that you've got scar tissue building up someplace, and now you hit some fresh tissue, but the tissue can't really open up because on one side of it is a bunch of scar tissue, so that other tissue gets deformed twice as much.
Yeah.
More deformation, more pain. So it's proximity to, I'm just coming up with thoughts, just thinking about muscle architecture here. And
Sure.
what's going on with injections is the amount of tissue deformation is going to be a function of the scar tissue that's around it, how much is left, depending on how close you might be to a vessel or how fast it gets carried away. That's going to vary. Like not every shot has this exact same pharmacokinetics. Whether you hit a nerve or nick a nerve, that's if you have everything else the same, depth can make a difference in all those sorts of things. Too. So you may not be quite as deep as you thought you were. I think that happens sometimes to people. Like if they're like if they're doing a self like glute shot, and they're not the most flexible guy, they're not like Stretch Armstrong, and they think they've got the needle all the way in, and they over the course of time they've just come out like a centimeter.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's a third of the length of the needle.
True.
Something like that. So you don't have the same depth. And that changes everything, moves it all around in a different spot. So,
and soreness afterward, your technique, you are a human being. So I think everything you said are probably more likely the case, but you are a human being. So maybe you moved around a little bit more. And if you move around with a 1-inch piece of metal jabbing through the muscle, the more you move that, the more pain you're going to have afterward, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. I would not suggest anyone do this, but I'll never forget when we're doing muscle biopsies. And muscle biopsies, I think I got a chopstick here.
You've always got a chopstick around.
I always got a chopstick, yeah. So, the muscle biopsy needle is actually bigger than a chopstick.
You're freaking kidding me.
No.
Good Lord.
Yeah. But, here's the interesting thing. You numb the area first, but it's just the surface, the skin. And so you can make a small incision in the skin, a small incision in the fascia, but you don't have to really cut through the muscle because this can just kind of fits down into the tissue. It's like beef tartare. It's very, very soft.
Oh, good God.
And when you put that in, you can kind of feel the pressure of it there.
Yeah,
it's a very odd thing, but it doesn't hurt. Some people, when the biopsy itself gets taken and the tissue is actually cut, they'll feel it a little bit. But I think a lot of it's just like kind of expectation,
Yeah, like me right now. I feel like that would hurt really bad.
Sorry, I don't want to gross anybody out.
I'd be like, my God, I'm just picturing it, man. That's rough.
This is why, like on both of my quads, amongst all the other muscle tears that I have, but both of my quads, like the sweep is shot because of practicing muscle biopsies on myself and putting it. And one day we're like, holy shit, you can like literally move this. You can swirl it around in there. It doesn't hurt.
No,
it didn't hurt at all. And the exercise psychologist there, his name is Dane Cook. If Dane ever listens, hey Dane, I hope you're good, brother. Great guy. Same name as the comedian now, but his focus, and I think it still is. He's an expert in pain during exercise.
Yeah,
and maybe he has no problem, Matt. He was like he wasn't quite sure why that wouldn't hurt. Because, you talk about all these pain receptors, these nociceptors that should be, substance P and like, the whole biophysiology of pain. And how could they not hurt when you're in there just obviously not doing that tissue any good?
Right.
Swirling the biopsy needle around, but it wouldn't hurt. Like, did it a couple times. Like, it doesn't hurt. You can go, back and forth and it doesn't hurt. Yeah. So anyway, sorry. We'll stop with that.
You can tell I would not be good at getting a quad biopsy.
A lot of people would faint. Yeah, we
would
had
they?
to Dudley. He was doing them. During the research officially, and he's of course who I learned this from, and did it with. But he would always ask. First, we always had the subject as often as possible. Sometimes people were on exercise bikes. One study we did, we had people in a heat chamber. Literally, they got the biopsy taken on the bike. So we had them stop moving, take a biopsy, and then get them back going again. But mostly it'd be like lying down, like just resting, because people would pass out. If you had someone sitting up or whatever, they didn't have to be lying down. But he'd always check the room. Like it's like, you good with blood? Ever faint before? Let's just say that,
Yeah.
Because you got to ask. Because people will. People just like they think they're good, and they see it and they're like, boom. And then you got someone with a cracked head who fainted,
Yeah.
you know, and the person who's got the biopsy going on isn't bothered by it at all.
They're good with it. Yeah, they're done.
Yeah.
Whew.
I had a couple people when I was doing e-stim. I did e-stim on hundreds of people, and I had only 2 people who ever had a problem with it. Well, actually 3. I take it back. Dane did, the guy I just mentioned, because he had totally spent so much time thinking about pain and muscle pain that he totally like freaked himself out. Huh. And he just was like, I can't do this, man. This is and he was a tough motherfucker. He was a college wrestler.
Yeah.
And he lifted. He was a big, thick dude, and but he just it freaked him out. It wigged him, you know. And there was another guy who was a power lifter, 300+ pound guy. He was elite level total. He came in, and watching his muscle contract by itself like that,
you're kidding me,
just freaked him out. Yeah, and he couldn't do it. He started to pass out.
I'll be damned.
And then there was once there was a student who came in, and we talked. She's seen it happen. She wasn't the first person to get zapped that day.
Yeah.
Sat her down and talked to her, and I said, she had a good friend with her there who knew about this, luckily. And I said, I asked her, kind of screened her beforehand, and she's like, I never thought about it. And she turns to her friend, remember that one thing? And he's like, oh shit. And he went and he grabbed her, and then I kind of got her secondarily. She had this tendency to go vasovagal, and when she'd get nervous, just anything, she'd pass out. She would go to give talks before
like a
class.
fainting goat. Those fainting goats. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. She collapsed numerous times in her life during stressful situations.
Holy shit. That's such a weird response to have, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, fight, flight, or freeze, and she would just kind of freeze.
Yeah. Okay.
Unconscious. So we started zapping her and just testing out the stem, and she just went woozy. Huh. We fell asleep for 30 seconds.
Well, listen,
I was a little scared.
While we're here, I did want to tell everybody, guys, if you want to learn more from Scott Stevenson, you can grab his book. It's Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. You can basically take yourself through your off season, through your contest prep, through your peak, and beyond. I love, Scott, that you start out talking about goal setting with that. And you could plan out your entire freaking year. It's not just hey, how do you get what's head down tilt? It's all the way from the start, which I think is pretty cool, man. I think that anybody at any level can learn from that. In fact, I think listening to or reading the book, it's helped me with that goal setting aspect that I hadn't necessarily thought about the value of that to the level that I do now. So I think it's important, and I think it's important to be able to set realistic goals. You know what I mean? That are reachable. So there's a lot of really good stuff in there. But while we were here, I wanted to mention that guys, you can get that at BYOBBcoach.com, as well as you can get the hardcover from Amazon. And if you do get the hardcover, Scott will inscribe each book to you. No, he doesn't inscribe.
I'll write my name in blood.
Yes. Yes. And you'll get a muscle each book comes with a quad muscle biopsy directly from Scott Stevenson. How about that?
Home biopsy kit. Yeah, you could Amazon, you buy the book and it'll give you buy both and save.
Yeah.
Home biopsy kit.
Yeah.
It's just a sharp knife and a hammer. It's just
but they want your biopsy. You get a Scott Stevenson original biopsy with each purchase of the book. That's what you're getting.
I told you when we analyzed my biopsy and we looked for fiber type, and I had one lone out of 400. It was a big sample, 400 fibers. There was one 2X fiber. One 2X fiber.
What's that mean?
So normally when you train, the 2X's become 2A's. Oh. Or we may have even called it a 2B at the time, but we probably called it a 2B at the time. But normally, if they get trained enough, then you don't see that myosin anymore, so that they don't get classified as that. Yeah. So it's this one lone fiber that I hadn't hit hard enough. So
it was the one holdout, and now it's gone. Yeah. Now it's not even in your body anymore.
And now it's gone. Well, I don't know. That means there's probably others though. That's the thing. So decades of shame. If you want to know what drives me in the gym, it's the shame from that one fiber, from that biopsy. So if you're looking for the dangling carrot, buy the Scott Stevenson home biopsy kit.
Yeah.
We'll run the histo on it and see if you have shameful muscle that needs to be obliterated for decades on end before you can live happily and sleep well.
And if you do, no, Scott is scoffing at you deep down inside.
And those fibers are scoffing at you. It's like, you can't activate me enough to make me change. I'm going to resist you. Make me grow. I dare you.
Yeah.
You can't do it. You're too weak and
I love
worthless
that. I love
and wimpy.
That. Jeremy Jason on Facebook. He's a Fortitude guy. I went out and took pictures of his family for him for Christmas yesterday. We made some really nice portraits. But he told me, he went to push-pull legs for a little while. He just got his pro card in a natural division this past year. And he went to push-pull legs for a little while. And he said, you know what? It's not for me. He said, I just went back to Fortitude. Yeah.
He sent me a message. He said he's been doing mainly Fortitude now for like 4 years.
Yeah. Which is pretty cool.
And it's been his best. I guess he said it's been his best. It was just like one of those okay, this is just too good to be true, but it was a really nice message.
It's true though, man. I've trained with him, and he pushes hard, and it's fit him perfectly. Like, he's not BSing, he's not like sugarcoating that just to make it sound good. You know what I mean? He really is running Fortitude.
It's the injury thing, I think, that helps. I mean, not that I'm injury free. Yeah. I'm not, but part of why I put it together that way is because I'm like, shit, I want to do this as long as I can.
Yeah.
And not, be just be a mess, by the time I'm 50 and still going strong. Just trained this morning. It was good.
Nice.
Yeah. So still kicking along.
All right. Well, let's get out of here. This is some good stuff, man. Some, I guess we could call it like, bodybuilding chemistry, steroid chemistry is kind of what we're looking at today.
Bodybuilding nerds. This is it.
Yes.
This is about as nerdy as it gets.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, listen, we appreciate you guys hanging with us. Of course, check out our great sponsors, True Nutrition. They've been with us for years. Of course, if you guys are in Canada, check out our Canadian sponsor, supplementsource.ca. And thank you once again, as I mentioned earlier, to all the people who are now supporting us on Patreon. You guys are directly helping me to pay for the software and all the bullshit that goes along with making a podcast. So I appreciate you guys very much. And Scott, I always appreciate hearing what you have to say next, because this has been part of my non-school education. I pick things up every week that we talk that kind of get stored away and then forgotten, and then 50% of the time remembered and when I need them. So thank you.
It's repetition is the key to learning, man. So I'll just keep on yapping as long as people are listening.
All right. See you guys.
Adios.